You know that specific high-pitched whine a dentist's drill makes right before it touches a cavity? That sound of compressed air and expensive engineering screaming against the laws of physics. That was the second loudest thing in my driveway last Tuesday. The loudest thing was Brenda. And Brenda wasn't revving up to fix a tooth. She was revving up to sue. I see it. I see the red eye. It's blinking at me. It's stealing my biometric data. My thumb hovered over the right joystick of the controller. About 50 feet above us, my brand new $2,000 DJI Mavic 3 was holding a perfect hover, fighting a mild crosswind with the grace of a robotic hummingbird. Down on the ground, however, grace was in short supply. Brenda, the vice president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association and the self-appointed sheriff of Suburbia, was currently standing in my azalea bush. She was wielding a yellow plastic rake like a gladiator holding a trident, stabbing mostly at the air, but occasionally getting dangerously close to my vinyl siding. "Brenda," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "the way you talk to a spooked horse or a toddler holding a pair of scissors. It's not stealing your biometrics. It's filming my gutters. We had that hailstorm last week, remember? I'm checking for granule loss on the shingles." She stopped raking the sky for a second to adjust her glasses. She was wearing her signature patrol uniform, a floral print blouse that probably cost more than my first car, beige capri pants that defied the crisp October chill, and a look of permanent, constipated disapproval. Her hair was that specific shade of blonde that doesn't exist in nature, sprayed into a helmet so rigid it could likely deflect small-caliber rounds. "Granule loss?" She spat the words out like they tasted like cheap wine. "Don't give me that technical mumbo-jumbo, Mark. I know what you're doing. You're peeping. You're a peeping Tom. With a remote control. You're filming me sunbathing." I looked at her. I looked at the gray, overcast sky, which was threatening rain any second. I looked back at her. She was wearing a North Face puffy parka over the blouse because it was 52 degrees out. "Brenda," I said slowly, tapping the screen on my controller to check the battery levels. "You're wearing a down coat. It is barely 50 degrees. And you're standing in my front yard. If I wanted to film you, I wouldn't need a drone. I'd just need to open my blinds, which, for the record, I keep closed specifically to avoid this interaction." "That's exactly what a pervert would say," she shrieked, winding up for another swing with the rake. "Bring it down. Bring that flying death machine down right now, or I will call the police, the FAA, and the board of directors, in that order." This is probably a good time to mention that I didn't buy the drone to annoy Brenda. Honest to God, I'm a freelance video editor and colorist. I spend 12 hours a day in a darkened room that smells like ozone and coffee, staring at DaVinci Resolve timelines and RGB parades until my eyes bleed. I needed a hobby that involved sunlight. Plus, a client of mine, a real estate developer, had asked for some generic suburban establishing shots for a commercial. I figured I could write the drone off as a business expense, check my roof for hail damage, and get some B-roll all in one go. It was efficiency. It was smart. But to Brenda, it was a predator drone circling a terrorist compound. And she was the innocent civilian, armed only with a rake and a deep-seated need to control the universe. "I'm bringing it down, Brenda," I sighed, toggling the stick down. The drone's hum dropped an octave as it began to descend. "Please step away from the landing zone. The props are carbon fiber. They spin at 5,000 RPM. They will slice that rake in half, and probably your fingers, too." "Don't you threaten me!" she yelled, but she took a step back. Unfortunately, she stepped back directly into the decorative river rock border I'd installed last spring to improve my curb appeal per her previous demand. Her heel caught the edge of a jagged piece of slate. Her arms windmilled in a desperate attempt to defy gravity, flailing wildly like an inflatable tube man at a car dealership. Gravity, unlike the HOA board, doesn't play favorites. She landed hard on her backside, right in the middle of my freshly laid cedar mulch. The rake clattered onto the driveway with a hollow plastic thud. The drone touched down 10 feet away with a gentle electronic chirp, shutting off its motors as if to say, "Awkward." For a second, there was silence. Just the sound of a distant leaf blower and Brenda gasping for air. I didn't laugh. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. I wanted to fall to my knees and thank the comedy gods for this gift. But I'm 32 years old. I have a mortgage that eats 40% of my income, and I know that laughing at a fallen HOA board member is basically signing a foreclosure warrant. I walked over, hand extended. "Are you okay?" She slapped my hand away like it was covered in plague sores. She scrambled up, brushing mulch off her pristine beige pants. Her face was turning a shade of purple that I would usually have to desaturate in post-production. "You assaulted me," she hissed. Her voice had dropped from a scream to a deadly, trembling whisper. "You used an aerial vehicle to intimidate a board member and caused physical injury." "I was standing 20 feet away, Brenda. You tripped over a rock you told me to install last May because my flower bed lacked definition." "I'm documenting this," she said, pulling out her iPhone 14 Pro Max. She snapped a photo of the drone sitting innocently on the concrete. Then she snapped a photo of me holding the controller. Then she snapped a photo of the landing zone, which was just my driveway. "You'll be hearing from the lawyers, Mark, and the police. You can't just fly commercial aircraft in a residential zone. It's against the bylaws. Section 4, Paragraph 2, nuisance and noise pollution." "It's quieter than your leaf blower, Brenda," I called out, as she began to limp. Exaggeratedly, I might add, favoring her left leg, even though she landed on her right, back toward her house across the street. "We'll see what Officer Miller thinks about that," she yelled back, not turning around. I stood there in the driveway, the cold wind biting at my neck, staring at my expensive piece of tech. I should have packed it up right then. I should have sold it on eBay, bought a knitting kit, and lived a quiet life. But there's something about a middle-aged woman threatening me with Section 4, Paragraph 2, that triggers a very specific, very immature part of my brain. It's the part of me that spent 4 years in engineering school before switching to film. The part of me that reads the terms of service just to find loopholes. I picked up the drone, inspected the lens for dust, and went inside. My house is what the real estate listing called a cozy craftsman, which is realtor speak for small and overpriced. I walked into the kitchen, placed the drone on the island, and started brewing a pot of coffee. The adrenaline from the confrontation was starting to fade, replaced by the dull ache of anxiety. Brenda Higgins wasn't just a neighbor. She was an institution. She had lived in Whispering Pines since the first foundation was poured in the 90s. She knew every bylaw, every setback requirement, and every easement. She was the reason the Johnson family 3 doors down had to repaint their mailbox because it was midnight black instead of obsidian black. She was the reason we weren't allowed to have basketball hoops that faced the street. She was the reason I had to hide my trash cans behind a trellis that cost $300. And now I had knocked her into the mulch. Figuratively speaking. I sat down at my desk, waking up my 3 monitors. The glow of the screens was comforting. This was my domain. Out there, Brenda controlled the horizontal and the vertical. But in here, I was God. I could color grade the sky to be purple. I could edit Brenda out of existence with a rotoscope brush. I plugged the drone's SD card into the reader. The footage popped up. It was crisp. Beautiful 5.1K resolution. I scrubbed through the timeline. There were the shingles, looking fine, actually. There was the chimney. There was the bird's eye view of the cul-de-sac. And there was the incident. I watched it in slow motion. The drone hovered. The camera gimbal tilted down slightly as I tried to land. You could see Brenda entering the frame from the bottom right, rake in hand. She looked deranged. She swung. She missed. She stepped back. Her foot caught the rock. The fall was cinematic. It was perfect. I saved the clip to a folder labeled Do Not Delete, Legal Defense. I tried to get back to work. I had a wedding video to edit for a couple who wanted their reception to look like a euphoric rave, even though it had taken place in a Holiday Inn banquet hall at 2:00 p.m. But I couldn't focus. I kept looking out the window. Brenda's house was directly across from mine. It was a beige monstrosity with perfect landscaping. Not a blade of grass was out of place. Her curtains were twitching. I knew she was on the phone. I knew she was rallying the troops. The troops, in this case, were the other members of the HOA board and the local police department, who Brenda treated like her personal security detail. I didn't have to wait long. It took exactly 48 hours for the hammer to drop. I was in the middle of a Zoom call with a difficult client, a corporate trainer who wanted me to make the PowerPoint slides pop more, when the pounding started. It wasn't the polite knock of a delivery driver dropping off an Amazon package. It was the heavy, authoritative thud of knuckles that are used to hitting things. "Hang on," I told the client, muting my mic. "I think my house is being raided." I walked to the door. Through the frosted glass, I could see the outlines of uniforms. 2 of them. My stomach did a little flip. I wasn't a criminal. My record consisted of 1 speeding ticket when I was 19 and a few late library books. But seeing cops on your doorstep triggers a primal fear response. I opened the door. Officer Miller looked like he had been carved out of granite and fed a diet of raw steak and justice. He was older, maybe mid-50s, with a mustache that commanded respect and a belt weighed down by more gear than a Navy SEAL. His name tag read Miller. Next to him was a younger officer, maybe my age. He looked less like granite, and more like he was still figuring out how the radio worked. His uniform was slightly rumpled, and his eyes were darting around my porch, looking at my Ring doorbell and the smart lock. His tag read Davis. "Sir, are you Mark Henderson?" Officer Miller asked. He had his thumbs hooked into his tactical vest. The universal posture for "I'm not arresting you yet, but I'm thinking about it." "That's me," I said, leaning against the door frame and trying to look casual. "Let me guess. The Vice President of Aesthetics called you." Miller didn't smile. "We received a complaint regarding a peeping Tom utilizing an unmanned aerial vehicle, a drone, to survey private property and harass residents. Do you own a drone, sir?" "I do," I said. "It's right here on the table." I stepped back and pointed to the kitchen table where the Mavic was sitting, charging. Its little green LEDs pulsed rhythmically. "May we come in?" "Do you have a warrant?" I asked. It slipped out. "I blame Netflix." Miller frowned. The lines on his forehead deepened. "We're investigating a noise and harassment complaint, sir. We can stand here and discuss your potential voyeurism charges on the porch where Mrs. Higgins and the rest of the neighborhood can hear, or we can step inside and handle this like adults." I looked across the street. Brenda wasn't even hiding it. She was standing on her front lawn, arms crossed, watching us with a look of smug satisfaction. The neighbor to my left, Mr. Henderson, no relation, just confusing for mail carriers, was peering over his hedge. "Come on in," I said, stepping aside. They walked into the living room. My setup was impressive if you're into tech. 3 4K monitors, a dedicated color grading panel with trackballs, a server rack humming in the corner with blue LEDs, and soundproofing foam on the walls. Officer Miller looked at it like it was a bomb-making factory. Officer Davis, however, looked at it like he had just walked into the Holy Grail. "Whoa," Davis whispered, breaking protocol immediately. Is that the Black Magic mini panel?" I blinked. I looked at Davis. Yeah, it is." Davis grinned, his hand instinctively reaching out before he caught himself. "Nice. I dabble in Premiere Pro at home, mostly gaming edits, but I've been wanting to learn Resolve. The node-based workflow just seems superior for color, right?" Miller cleared his throat. It sounded like a shovel hitting gravel. Davis snapped back to attention, his face going red. "Sir," Miller said, pulling out a notepad and ignoring his partner's geek out. "Mrs. Brenda Higgins claims you were flying this device at window level, filming her while she was in a state of partial undress in her backyard sunbathing area." "Partial undress?" I laughed. It was a nervous laugh, but genuine. "Officer, she was wearing a parka, a North Face parka. And I wasn't filming her. I was inspecting my roof. I have the flight logs and the SD card right here. It records everything. GPS path, altitude, camera angle. I can show you exactly where the drone was every second of the flight." I grabbed the controller, plugged it into my iPad, and pulled up the flight record app. I handed the iPad to Miller. He stared at the screen like I'd handed him an alien artifact written in Klingon. He squinted at the squiggly lines. He passed it to Davis. "Look at the telemetry, Davis. You know this stuff." Davis took the iPad. His eyes lit up. "Oh, sick. You've got the new Mavic 3? The one with the Hasselblad sensor? Dude, the dynamic range on this is insane. I saw a review on YouTube where they flew it in a canyon and—" "Davis," Miller barked. "The crime. Focus on the crime." "Right. Sorry, Sarge." Davis tapped the screen, scrolling through the metadata with practiced ease. "Okay, looking at the flight path. See this blue line? That's the drone. See the red boundary? That's Mr. Henderson's property line. He takes off here, goes up to 20 feet, hovers, then goes straight up to 200 feet. He never crosses the street. He never goes over Mrs. Higgins' yard." Davis looked up, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "And check the gimbal pitch. The camera was pointed down at a 45-degree angle or straight down the whole time. Unless Mrs. Higgins was on his roof, he wasn't filming her." Miller looked annoyed. The easy arrest, the simple confiscate the toy and go home solution, was evaporating. "What about the harassment? She claims he dive-bombed her." "I have the video cache too," I said, sensing the tide turning. "Low-res proxy files are stored on the controller. Want to see?" I pulled up the clip. We gathered around the small screen. We watched the drone hover. We saw the shingles. Then we saw a tiny, angry figure in the corner of the frame waving a rake like a maniac. The drone moved away from her. The figure chased it, tripped over a rock, and face-planted into the mulch. Davis snorted. He tried to turn it into a cough, covering his mouth with his hand, but it was definitely a snort. She seems to have lost her footing, Sarge. Tactical error. Bad terrain." Miller watched the video twice. He sighed, the long, weary sigh of a man who realized he was a pawn in a suburban war that paid far less than it cost in patience. "All right," Miller said, closing his notebook with a snap. "Mr. Henderson, legally, you're in the clear. You're on your property, you're under the 400-foot ceiling, and you're not recording private areas where there's an expectation of privacy. However," He paused for effect, giving me the dad look. However, for the sake of neighborhood peace, maybe keep the flights to a minimum. Mrs. Higgins calls us about 3 times a week. Last week it was because the mailman's truck was too yellow. We don't need the paperwork, and frankly, neither do you. I hear you, officer, I said. But I use this for work. And maintenance. I'm not trying to spy on her. I'd rather watch paint dry. Just use common sense, Miller said, turning to the door. Davis lingered for a second as Miller stepped onto the porch. Hey, seriously though, if you post any of that footage, let me know. I want to see how that sensor handles the highlights on the clouds. It looked crispy. Will do, I grinned. As they walked back to their cruiser, I stood in the doorway. Brenda came rushing out of her house, her arms flapping. She intercepted Miller on the sidewalk. I couldn't hear the exact words, but I saw Miller shake his head. I saw him point to my house, then point to the sky, then make a calm down motion with his hands, palms down, lowering them slowly. Brenda went rigid. She looked at me. Even from 50 yards away, I could feel the heat of her glare. It was radioactive. She didn't scream this time. She just nodded, turned around, and marched back into her house. I thought I had won. I thought the law was the ultimate shield. I was an idiot. The next morning, there was a letter taped to my front door. It wasn't in an envelope. It was just a piece of thick, cream-colored cardstock with the Whispering Pines HOA letterhead embossed in gold foil at the top. It looked like a wedding invitation from Satan. Notice of violation. Resident, Mark Henderson address, 404 Oak Lane. Violation. Operating commercial machinery in a residential zone, Section 8.4. Violation. Excessive noise pollution impacting neighbor comfort, Section 4.2. Violation. Unsightly conduct, public nuisance, Section 12.1. Penalty, $500, due date, 7 days. Failure to pay will result in a lien being placed on the property and suspension of amenity privileges. I stared at the paper. My hands started to shake. Commercial machinery? It was a consumer drone bought at Best Buy. Excessive noise? A lawnmower is 90 decibels. My drone is 60. And unsightly conduct? Was that for existing while Brenda fell down? I walked into my office, slammed the notice onto my desk, and did what any rational, angry millennial would do. I pulled up the HOA bylaws PDF. It was a massive document, 140 pages of legal jargon designed to crush the human spirit. It had been scanned in crookedly. I poured another coffee, my third, and started reading. I read for 3 hours. I searched for machinery. I searched for aircraft. I searched for noise. Most people stop reading when they get bored, but I edit video for a living. I am used to looking at the same 3 seconds of footage for 4 hours to fix a stray hair. I have patience weaponized by tedium. And then, deep in the appendix, buried under regulations about fence height and acceptable shades of beige for exterior trim, I found it. Section 9, Subsection C, Permitted Exterior Maintenance. Homeowners are permitted to utilize tools, ladders, scaffolding, and diagnostic equipment necessary for the maintenance and structural integrity of the home's exterior. Such activities are exempt from noise violations and commercial machinery restrictions between the hours of 8 Hunquak a.m. and 6 Hunquak p.m., provided the equipment is operated safely for the purpose of home repair. Diagnostic equipment. I read it again. Diagnostic equipment. I smiled. a slow, wicked smile that probably looked a bit unhinged in the reflection of my monitor. The bylaws didn't define diagnostic equipment. They didn't say it had to be a tape measure or a level. It just said it had to be necessary for maintenance. But I couldn't just say it was for maintenance. Brenda would challenge that. I needed an expert. I needed a professional. I needed a contractor who hated Brenda as much as I did. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found him. Tony. Roof and gutters. Tony, I said when he picked up on the third ring. It's Mark Henderson, the guy with the slate roof and the complicated gutters. There was a pause, followed by the distinct sound of a power drill whirring in the background. Mark? Oh yeah, the guy who pays on time. I like you. What's wrong? Did a tree branch decide to fight your chimney again? No, I said, leaning back in my chair and watching Brenda's house through the slats of my blinds. My roof is fine, but my legal standing is crumbling. How busy are you right now? I'm on a job in Westlake, Tony grunted. Installing a skylight for a lady who thinks natural light will cure her cat's depression. Why? I have a situation. A Brenda situation. The drill stopped immediately. The silence on the line was heavy, pregnant with shared trauma. Brenda? Tony asked, his voice dropping an octave. Brenda Higgins? The one with the face like a bulldog chewing a wasp? The one who called the cops on my truck last year because my rear bumper was overhanging the sidewalk by 2 inches? That's the one. I hate that woman, Tony said. It wasn't casual hate. It was the deep, abiding hatred of a tradesman who has been told how to do his job by someone who has never held a hammer. She tried to get my business license revoked because I dripped a single drop of oil on the street. 1 drop, Mark. I had to scrub it with Dawn dish soap while she watched. Well, I said, she just fined me $500 for flying my drone. She says it's commercial machinery. But I found a loophole. Section 9, subsection C. It says I can use diagnostic equipment if it's necessary for maintenance. And if a licensed contractor, that's you, authorizes it. Diagnostic equipment. Tony rolled the words around in his mouth. I like it. Sounds expensive. I need you to come over, I said. I need you to stand in my driveway, point at my roof, look concerned, and sign a work order that says I need to perform daily aerial structural monitoring for, let's say, microfractures. Microfractures, Tony chuckled. It was a dark, joyful sound. Oh, that's good. That's very good. And let's add thermal anomalies, too. Sounds scarier. Can you make it today? Mark, Tony said, for the chance to ruin Brenda's afternoon, I would leave this skylight half open in a rainstorm. I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to his word, Tony's beat-up Ford F-150 roared down the street 18 minutes later. And when I say roared, I mean it. Tony had a hole in his muffler that he refused to fix, specifically because it annoyed the HOAs he worked in. It sounded like a tank gargling gravel. He backed into my driveway, ignoring the "No Commercial Vehicles Overnight" sign that Brenda had planted near the community entrance. He parked slightly crooked, just enough to trigger anyone with OCD, but legally within the lines. I walked out to meet him. Tony was a big guy. He looked like a bear that had been shaved and forced into a neon yellow safety vest. He was holding a clipboard and chewing on an unlit cigar that looked like a stick of dynamite. Mr. Henderson! Tony shouted as he slammed his truck door. He was projecting. He was performing. He was ready for Broadway. Good to see you. I got your emergency call about the instability. I suppressed a smile. Thanks for coming so fast, Tony. I'm really worried about the ridgeline. Brenda's front door opened. I knew it would. She stepped out onto her porch, arms crossed, wearing a visor that shielded her eyes from the non-existent sun. She was watching us like a hawk watching a field mouse. "Yeah," Tony said, walking to the middle of the driveway and staring up at my roof. He put his hands on his hips. He shook his head. "That doesn't look good. See that shadow? Right there by the flashing?" There was no shadow. There was nothing. It was a pristine roof. "I see it," I lied. "Is it bad?" "Could be catastrophic," Tony boomed. "We're talking water intrusion, mold, structural rot. If that flashing goes, the whole living room ceiling could come down. You need to keep a close eye on that." Brenda had taken a few steps down her driveway. She was trying to eavesdrop without looking like she was eavesdropping. She was pretending to inspect her mailbox. "So, what do we do?" I asked. "Do I need to hire a crew to go up there every day?" Tony scratched his chin with the clipboard. "Nah, too dangerous to put a man up there daily. OSHA regulations, you know. Plus, the weight of boots on those shingles could make the microfractures worse. No, you need non-invasive monitoring." He turned and looked directly at Brenda, then looked back at me. "You got that drone?" Tony asked. "The high-tech one with the optical zoom?" "I do. That's your best bet," Tony said, pulling a pen from behind his ear. "I'm going to write you an official prescription. I mean, a work order. I need you to fly that bird up there once a day. Hover at 20 feet. Get 4K video of the flashing. If you see the gap widen by even a millimeter, you call me." "Understood," I said. "Is that legal?" "The HOA says—" "To hell with the HOA!" Tony shouted, knowing full well the vice president was 40 feet away. "This is structural integrity. Safety code supersedes HOA bylaws. Section 9, subsection C. It's federal or state or something. It's the law." Brenda flinched. She knew Section 9. She knew she had lost. Tony scribbled furiously on the invoice. He ripped off the pink carbon copy and handed it to me with a flourish. Invoice number 4092. Service, emergency consultation. Diagnosis, suspected microfractures and thermal anomalies. Prescription, daily aerial surveillance, a drone, required for safety monitoring. Cost was $0. Professional courtesy. "Thanks, Tony," I said, shaking his hand. "Don't thank me," Tony winked. "Just keep the neighborhood safe. You never know when a roof might just collapse." He got back in his truck. He revved the engine twice, letting the muffler sing the song of his people, and peeled out of the cul-de-sac. I stood there holding the pink slip of paper like it was the Declaration of Independence. I looked at Brenda. She stared at the paper in my hand. Then she stared at me. She didn't say a word. She just turned around, walked back inside, and slammed her door so hard I felt the vibration through my shoes. I went inside and scanned the invoice. 10 minutes later, I sent an email to the entire HOA board, copying the property management company. Subject: Dispute of Violation, 88392. Authorized maintenance. Dear Board, please find attached the professional assessment from a licensed roofing contractor regarding the urgent structural monitoring required for my property. As per the bylaws, Section 9, subsection C, the use of diagnostic tools for maintenance is permitted. The drone flights will continue daily for safety purposes. Any further interference with this necessary maintenance could be construed as liability on the part of the HOA should water damage occur. Please confirm the rescinding of the $500 fine immediately. Regards, Mark Henderson. The reply came 2 hours later. It was from Dave, the HOA president. Dave was a nice guy who just wanted to grill hot dogs and watch football, but he had been beaten into submission by Brenda over the years. Mark, fine rescinded. Please fly safely. Tell Tony I said hi. Dave. I had won the battle. The fine was gone. I was legally allowed to fly. But I had underestimated Brenda. I had humiliated her in front of a contractor. I had used her own rule book against her. And a woman like Brenda doesn't take defeat lying down. If she couldn't stop the drone, she was going to. Make sure I suffered on the ground. The guerrilla warfare began on Thursday. I was sitting in my office, color grading a music video for a SoundCloud rapper who wanted to look like he was in Miami. We shot it in a parking lot in New Jersey, when I saw movement on my front lawn. I stood up and walked to the window. Brenda was there. She was on her hands and knees. She was holding a wooden ruler. I watched, mesmerized by the pettiness, as she stuck the ruler into my grass. She squinted at the measurement. She moved 2 feet to the left. She stuck the ruler in again. The HOA limit for grass height was 3 inches. I usually kept mine at 2.5, but we'd had rain, and I'd been busy. She stood up, pulled out her phone, and snapped a photo of the ruler next to a blade of fescue. 10 minutes later, my email pinged. Notice of violation. Violation, unsightly turf. Grass exceeds 3 inches. Fine. $50. I laughed. I actually laughed. It was $50. I made that in 20 minutes of editing. I paid it immediately online, just to rob her of the satisfaction of a chase. Then I went out and mowed the lawn. I mowed it so short it looked like a putting green. I stared at her house the entire time. Friday was garbage day. In our neighborhood, bins can't be placed on the curb before 5:00 p.m. the night before. I usually put mine out at 5:15 p.m. when I finished work. At 4:55 p.m., I heard a noise. I looked out. Brenda was standing on the sidewalk, checking her watch. She was staring at my garage door, waiting for it to open. She was literally camping my trash cans. I waited. I sat in my kitchen, drinking a beer, watching the clock. 4:58 p.m. 4:59 p.m. 5 p.m. I hit the button. The garage door rumbled up. Brenda looked disappointed. She had her phone ready to document the early placement. I dragged the bins down the driveway. "Right on time, Mark," she called out. She was pruning her roses, snipping the heads off flowers with violent precision. "You know me, Brenda," I said, placing the blue recycling bin next to the gray trash bin. "Rule follower." She sniffed. "Make sure the lids are fully closed. Section 12 states that trash must not be visible. If the lid is propped open by even an inch, that's a violation." I looked at my bins. The lids were closed. "They look closed to me." "We'll see," she said darkly. "The wind can be tricky." I went back inside. Saturday brought the mailbox incident. She claimed my mailbox post was leaning at a 4-degree angle. I went out with a level. It was perfectly straight. I sent her a photo of the level. She responded that my level was uncalibrated. It was exhausting. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. She was trying to break me. She wanted me to explode, to scream, to give her grounds for a harassment suit or a restraining order that would force me to move. But she forgot one thing. I had a drone. And I had a work order that required me to fly it. Every day at noon, like clockwork, I walked out to my driveway. I set up the landing pad. I launched the Mavic 3. Whirr! The sound became the soundtrack of the neighborhood. I would fly it up to 20 feet, hover in front of my roof for the inspection, and then, because Tony's order didn't specify how long the inspection needed to take, I would take it up to 200 feet for a broad-spectrum structural analysis. From 200 feet, you see everything. You see the way the streets curve. You see the kids playing in the cul-de-sac. You see the delivery trucks rushing their routes. And you see into people's backyards. Now, let me be clear. I wasn't trying to spy. I wasn't zooming in on Mrs. Gable sunbathing. She was 80, God bless her, or the Smith kids swimming. I was mostly looking at the horizon, checking the exposure, testing different color profiles. But on Tuesday of the second week, Trash Day Eve, I saw it. I was flying the drone back toward the landing zone. The battery was at 15%. As I banked over the property line, the camera panned across Brenda's backyard. Her yard was a fortress. 6-foot white vinyl fencing. Locked gates. From the street, it was Fort Knox. No one could see what happened in Brenda's sanctuary. But from the air, it was an open book. I glanced at the screen on my controller. I was about to toggle the Return to Home feature when movement caught my eye. Brenda was on her back porch. She was struggling with something. I let the drone hover. I adjusted the gimbal. The camera locked onto her. She was dragging 3 large black contractor bags out of her house. These weren't normal kitchen trash bags. These were the heavy-duty 30-gallon bags you use for demolition or bodies. I frowned. Brenda lived alone. What kind of trash was she generating? She dragged them to her bins. Her gray trash bin, the one for actual garbage, was clearly full. The lid was already propped open. A violation, Brenda. She looked around. She looked left. She looked right. She craned her neck to look over the fence. She didn't look up. People never look up. It's an evolutionary blind spot. She grabbed the first black bag. She opened the blue recycling bin. My breath hitched. The blue bin. The sacred vessel of the Green Initiative. Brenda was the one who had instituted the zero-tolerance recycling policy 3 months ago. She had forced the board to hire a new waste management company that was stricter about sorting. She had personally written the newsletter article titled, "Recycling, It's Not Just a Choice, It's a Moral Obligation." She had fined the Thompsons down the street $100 because they put a pizza box in the recycling. Grease, she had lectured at the last meeting, ruins the paper pulp. It contaminates the batch. I watched the screen, transfixed. Brenda shoved the black bag into the recycling bin. It was a tight squeeze. She grunted. Couldn't hear it, but I saw her shoulders heave. She pushed it down. Then she grabbed a loose object from the ground. It was a pizza box. Not just a pizza box. A greasy pizza box. I could see the oil stains from 200 feet away. It was a Domino's box. Pepperoni, if I had to guess. She folded it in half and jammed it into the side of the bin, right next to the black plastic bag. Then, the kicker. She went back inside and came out with a bag of styrofoam packing peanuts. Styrofoam. Expanded polystyrene. The kryptonite of recycling plants. It is strictly, absolutely, 100% forbidden in the blue bins. It jams the sorting machines. It costs the city thousands of dollars a year. Brenda popped the bag open and poured the peanuts into the blue bin, filling the gaps around the black bag like she was packing a fragile vase. She sat on the lid to close it. She bounced once, twice, until the latch clicked. She dusted her hands off. She looked satisfied. She looked like a woman who had just gotten away with murder. I hit the record button on the controller to make sure the cache was saved, but I had been rolling the whole time. I brought the drone down. My hands were trembling, but not from fear, from excitement. I ran inside and plugged the SD card into my computer. I pulled up the footage on the big 32-inch 4K monitor. It was glorious. The resolution was sharp enough to count the wrinkles on her forehead. I could see the logo on the pizza box. I could identify the brand of the trash bags. I leaned back in my chair. Brenda Higgins, the woman who measured my grass with a ruler, the woman who fined me for a yellow mail truck, was a recycling fraud. She was a hypocrite of the highest order. I could have emailed the video to the board right then. I could have printed screenshots and taped them to her door, but that felt small. That felt like something she would do. I didn't want a fine. I didn't want a slap on the wrist. I wanted total destruction. I checked the HOA calendar. The annual general meeting was in 2 weeks. The topic? The Green Initiative, Phase 2. Brenda was the keynote speaker. I looked at the footage of the styrofoam cascading into the bin like forbidden snow. "Tony," I whispered to the empty room, "I think we're going to need a better camera." I picked up my phone. "Hey, Tony," I said when he answered. "About those microfractures. I think they're getting worse. I think I need a permanent monitoring solution, something with a zoom lens, mounted on the chimney." "Is this about the roof, Mark?" Tony asked, hearing the glee in my voice. "No, Tony, it's about the environment. I'm going green." "I'll be there tomorrow," Tony said. "I'll bring the 30 times optical zoom. We catching raccoons?" "Something like that," I said. "Something like that." I looked out the window at Brenda's house. She was back in her yard, measuring the distance of my bins from the curb with a tape measure. "Go ahead, Brenda," I thought. "Measure away. Because while you're looking at inches, I'm recording in 5K. The war had just gone nuclear. Tony arrived the next morning at 7:59 a.m. He parked his truck directly in front of my house, blocking my driveway but leaving exactly enough room for the mail truck to pass, just to stay legal. He was already smoking a cigar that smelled like burning gym socks. "Morning, sunshine," he bellowed as I opened the door. He pointed to the bed of his truck. "I brought the Hubble telescope." Sitting in the back, nestled in a box labeled Industrial Surveillance Solutions, was a white dome camera the size of a basketball. "Tony," I said, eyeing the monstrosity, "is that excessive?" "Excessive?" Tony laughed. He slapped the side of the truck. "Mark, this is a Hikvision Darkfighter PTZ with 30 times optical zoom and infrared night vision that can see a raccoon's heartbeat from 3 blocks away. It's not excessive. It's necessary." "For the microfractures," I added quickly, glancing across the street. "Right, the microfractures. And the wind shear. Gotta monitor the wind shear." Brenda was already at her window. I could see the blinds parting. She was probably timing Tony to see if he started work before 8 o'clock a.m. so she could hit him with a noise violation. Tony checked his watch. He waited until the second hand ticked past the 12. 8 o'clock a.m. Vrt! He fired up his impact driver. The sound tore through the quiet morning air like a banshee. We went up to the roof. Tony moved with the surprising agility of a man who ate gas station burritos for lunch. He mounted the camera on the side of the chimney, facing backward towards my backyard, but angled just so. "See?" Tony explained, tightening the bolts. "If we point it straight at her house, that's illegal. That's surveillance. But if we point it at your backyard fence to monitor your property line for intruders, and her backyard just happens to be in the background, well, that's just unavoidable incidental coverage. The courts love incidental coverage." "You've done this before," I noted. "Mark, I've been divorced 3 times. I know the laws of surveillance better than the CIA." He wired it down through the attic vent, dropping the Cat 6 cable right into my office closet. By 10 o'clock a.m., the camera was live. I sat at my desk and pulled up the feed. The quality was terrifying. My previous drone footage was good, but this was military grade. On my center monitor, I had a crisp, stabilized 60 frames per second view of the property line. I used the joystick on the software interface to zoom. Whirr. The camera motor responded instantly. I zoomed in on a squirrel sitting on my fence. I could count its whiskers. I panned slightly left. There it was, the target zone. Brenda's back patio. The 3 bins, gray, trash, blue, recycle, green, compost, stood like, sentinels. It's beautiful, I whispered. That'll be $500 for the install, Tony said, wiping grease on his pants. But for the camera, I'll lease it to you for $1 a month. Call it a long-term testing agreement. You're a saint, Tony. I'm just a man who hates Brenda, he said. Happy hunting. For the next 2 weeks, I didn't leave my house. I became the Jimmy Stewart of suburbia, staring out my rear window, or rather my monitor, waiting for the crime. And to understand why what I was doing wasn't just petty, but righteous, you have to understand the context. You have to understand the Green Initiative. 6 months ago, Brenda had launched a coup. She had decided that Whispering Pines wasn't eco-friendly enough. She lobbied the board. She bullied the management company. She instituted the Zero Waste Pledge. Every household had to sign it. It was a document that promised we would rinse our yogurt cups. It promised we would separate our paper from our plastics. It promised we would never, ever contaminate the recycling stream. If you violated the pledge? First offense, written warning. Second offense, $50. Fine. Third offense, $100 fine plus mandatory re-education seminar, which was just Brenda lecturing you in her living room for an hour. She had turned the neighborhood into a police state of garbage. Mrs. Higgins, no relation to Brenda, thank God, got fined because her grandson threw a juice box in the paper bin. Mr. Patel got fined because he put his grass clippings in plastic bags instead of paper bags. I got a warning because I didn't flatten my Amazon boxes sufficiently. Brenda posted about it on the neighborhood Facebook group every single day. Found a plastic straw in the gutter today. We are killing the oceans, people. Do better. Saw the recycling truck driver shake his head at the Miller residence's bin. Shameful. She positioned herself as the Lorax. She spoke for the trees, but I knew the truth. I had seen the pizza box, and now I was going to see the rest. Day 1, the toaster incident. It was Wednesday. Brenda came out around 2:00 p.m. She was holding a toaster. It was a chrome 4-slice model. The cord was dangling. Now, e-waste is a big deal. You can't throw electronics in the trash or the recycling. You have to drive them to the county facility on Saturdays. It's a pain, but it's the law. I hit record. Brenda walked to the bins. She opened the blue bin. She looked at the toaster. She looked at the bin. She dropped the toaster in. Clang. I winced. That sound was the sound of a sorting machine breaking. She just threw a mix of plastic, metal, and copper wire into the single-stream recycling. Violation 1, I muttered, logging the timestamp in a spreadsheet I had named the Brenda Files. Improper disposal of e-waste. Penalty, $200. Day 3, the vacuum cleaner. Friday morning. Brenda was cleaning, could see her dusting through her patio door. She came out holding the canister from her Dyson vacuum. It was full of gray fluff. Dust, hair, skin cells, dead spiders. The rules state that vacuum dust goes in the trash, gray bin. It cannot be composted, synthetic carpet fibers. and it cannot be recycled. Brenda walked to the green bin. Compost. She opened the canister. Whoosh! A cloud of dust exploded into the compost bin. She tapped it against the side to get every last dust bunny out. Violation 2, I typed. Contamination of organic waste stream. Penalty, $75. Day 6. The paint can. This was a big one. Brenda was doing some touch-up painting on her fence. She had a gallon of white latex paint. She finished the job, leaving about an inch of liquid paint in the bottom of the can. Liquid paint is hazardous waste. You have to let it dry out with kitty litter before you trash it. You can never recycle the can if it has wet paint in it. Brenda didn't use kitty litter. She didn't wait. She walked the wet paint can over to the blue bin and dropped it in. I gasped. If that can tipped over in the truck, it would ruin the entire load. Tons of paper and cardboard, ruined by white latex. Violation 3, I said, my voice shaking with rage. Hazardous material in recycling. Penalty, $500 and possible state citation. I was building a case. I had clips, I had zoom-ins, I had slow-motion replays. I was editing a montage set to the tune of In the Hall of the Mountain King, the tempo speeding up as her crimes became more frequent. But I needed a finale. I needed something so egregious, so undeniable, that no amount of, "Oh, I made a mistake," could cover it up. I needed the smoking gun. It happened on the Tuesday of the second week. It was the day before the board meeting. Brenda came out of her garage. She was struggling. She was carrying something heavy, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag. I zoomed in. Whirr! The object was rectangular, heavy, boxy. She set it down on the patio table to catch her breath. The plastic bag slipped slightly. I saw the terminal posts. I saw the warning label with the skull and crossbones. It was a car battery. A lead-acid 12-volt car battery. My jaw hit the desk. Lead-acid batteries are environmental poison. They contain sulfuric acid and lead. If that thing cracked open in a landfill, let alone a recycling center, it was a disaster. Brenda looked at the gray bin. Full. She looked at the green bin. Full. She looked at the blue bin. Don't do it, Brenda, I whispered. Don't you do it. She picked up the battery. She waddled over to the blue bin. She opened the lid. She dropped it. Thud. The sound was heavy. Dead. Final. She closed the lid. She dusted her hands. She looked up at the sky, giving a little satisfied smile, as if she had just saved a whale. I stopped recording. I sat back. I had it. I had the toaster, the vacuum dust, the paint, the pizza boxes, the styrofoam, and now, the car battery. If I sent this to the board, they would fine her. Sure, maybe she'd get kicked off the committee. But Brenda was a cockroach. She would survive. She would spin it. She would say the video was doctored. She would say I was stalking her, which, okay, fair point, but Tony signed off on it. I needed a public execution. I needed the court of public opinion. And then, my email dinged. Subject: Reminder. Mandatory HOA Town Hall tonight. From Whispering Pines Board Agenda. 1. Budget Review. 2. Landscaping Updates. 3. Keynote: The Path to Zero Waste. Presented by Vice President Brenda Higgins. 4. Vote on Random Bin Inspection Measure. I read the agenda. Vote on Random Bin Inspection Measure. She was going to ask the neighborhood to vote to allow her to dig through our trash. She was going to stand up in front of 150 families and lecture us about purity while a lead-acid battery sat in her recycling bin, leaking sulfuric acid. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. I looked at my setup. I had DaVinci Resolve open. I had the Brenda compilation edited and color-graded, but a pre-recorded video could be dismissed. "That's old footage!" she would scream. I needed it to be live. I needed to catch her in the act during the meeting. I knew her pattern. Every Tuesday night, during the commercial break of The Bachelor, or in this case, the intermission of the HOA meeting, she took out the kitchen trash one last time before the truck came Wednesday morning. I looked at the clock. The meeting started at 7:00 p.m. I opened a new tab. Twitch.tv, sign up. Username, The Recycling, Raccoon Stream title, live, The Hypocrisy of Whispering Pines. I configured OBS Studio. I set up a split screen. Left side, the chimney camera feed, the trap. Right side, my drone feed, the eye in the sky. I tested the audio. I tested the bit rate. Then I went to the garage and grabbed a few props, a whiteboard, a marker, and a bag of popcorn. I wasn't just going to report her, I was going to host a watch party. I walked back into my office and looked at the camera feed one last time. Brenda was in her kitchen, pacing back and forth, practicing her speech. She was wearing her power blazer, a lime green jacket that made her look like a radioactive lime. She had no idea that 20 feet above her head, a lens worth more than her car was tracking her every move. "Tony," I said to the empty room, "you're going to want to see this." I texted Tony the link. I texted my buddy Davis, the cop, the link. I texted my sister. Then I logged into the Zoom meeting. There were already 100 people in the waiting room. The chat was disabled until the meeting started. I poured myself a glass of scotch. Single malt. Neat. The clock struck 7:00 p.m. The Zoom screen flickered to life. "Good evening, everyone," Dave, the HOA president, said. He looked tired. He looked like a man who would rather be undergoing a root canal than moderating this call. "Welcome to the November Town Hall. Please keep your microphones muted." In the top right square of the grid, Brenda was smiling. It was a predatory smile. She adjusted her webcam. Behind her, her virtual background was a photo of a pristine rainforest. "Thank you, Dave," she interrupted. "I'm so excited to share some startling data with you all tonight regarding our compliance issues." I took a sip of scotch. Startling data, I thought. You have no idea, Brenda. I waited. The trap was set. Now, I just needed the mouse to get hungry. The digital purgatory of a homeowners association Zoom meeting is a special circle of hell that Dante forgot to map. It was 7:15 p.m. My screen was a grid of 148 low-resolution faces. There was Mr. Abernathy in 4B, who was filming his own forehead at an angle that suggested he was trying to inspect his nostrils. There was the distraught mother in 12C, wrangling a toddler who was screaming something that sounded suspiciously like anarchy. There was Dave, the president, looking like a man who was actively calculating the terminal velocity required to end his suffering if he jumped out his first-floor window. And then there was Brenda. Brenda's video feed was crisp. 1080p. She had clearly invested in a ring light, which reflected in her glasses like the twin suns of a hostile planet. Her virtual background was a stock photo of a lush, untouched Amazonian rainforest, a subtle reminder of what we were all destroying with our K-cups. And that brings me to the issue of micro-contamination, Brenda was saying. She held up a Ziploc bag. Inside was a single, crumpled sticky note. I found this in the paper recycling bin of the Thompson residence. It has adhesive on the back. Adhesive, people. Glue. Chemicals. She shook the bag for emphasis. The recycling plant cannot process adhesive, she lectured, her voice tinny through the laptop. Speakers. When you throw a sticky note in the blue bin, you are essentially jamming the gears of progress. You are telling the earth, I don't care. I took a sip of my scotch. It tasted like oak and anticipation. In the chat box on the right side of the Zoom window, the neighbors were restless. From Sarah J. to everyone. Is a sticky note really a violation? From Brenda Higgins to everyone. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse, Sarah. That will be a $25 citation. The chat went silent. She was fining people in real time. In the chat. Now, Brenda continued, smoothing her lime green blazer. Before we vote on the new random bin inspection measure, which will allow certified board members, specifically me, to audit your waste receptacles between the hours of 6 o'clock a.m. and 8 o'clock p.m. I want to share some statistics. She tried to share her screen. Can everyone see my pie chart? We see your desktop, Brenda, Dave sighed. We see a folder called Evidence Against the Hendersons? I choked on my scotch. Brenda quickly closed the window. Ahem. Wrong folder. Just general research, anyway. She launched into a PowerPoint presentation that had clearly been made in 1998. The fonts were Comic Sans. The transitions were star wipes. It was 20 minutes of pure, unadulterated guilt-tripping. She showed pictures of sea turtles. She showed pictures of landfills. She showed a picture of my house with a red circle around my trash cans, which were perfectly legal, by the way. Some residents, she said, staring directly into the webcam lens, piercing my soul across the fiber optic network, treat our community guidelines as suggestions. They fly toy airplanes. They create noise. And worst of all, they co-mingle their recyclables. I checked my OBS studio setup on my second monitor. Scene 1, Chimney Cam, the Darkfighter PTZ. Scene 2, Drone Cam, hovering at 300 feet, silent mode, holding position. Overlay, a text scroller that read live from Whispering Pines. The Twitch stream key was active. The bitrate was stable at 6,000 kbps. I had 0 viewers. For now. Dave, Brenda said, checking her watch. I've been speaking for 40 minutes. My throat is parched. Shall we take a 10-minute recess before the vote? I want everyone to have clear heads when they authorize the inspections. Dave looked like he wanted to cry with relief. Yes. God, yes, 10 minutes, everyone back at 8 o'clock p.m. sharp. Excellent, Brenda said. I'm going to step away to hydrate and reflect. She clicked a button. Her camera turned off. Her microphone icon turned red with a slash through it. The grid of faces relaxed. People stood up to stretch. Mr. Abernathy finally stopped filming his nose. I leaned forward. This was it. The window. I looked at the chimney camera feed. Brenda's back door opened. She stepped out. She was still wearing the lime green blazer. But below, the waist? Oh, it was better than I could have imagined. She wasn't just wearing pajama pants. She was wearing fuzzy pajama pants, bright pink, with little cartoon Snoopy dogs wearing Santa hats. And on her feet? Oversized plush slippers shaped like bear claws. The Vice President of Aesthetics. The Iron Lady of HOA compliance. Wearing bear claws. She was carrying a large white object. It was boxy. It had a cord trailing behind it. It was a microwave. An old, yellowing countertop microwave oven from the mid-2000s. I watched as she lugged it toward the bins. I turned back to the Zoom chat. From me to everyone. Guys, is anyone else seeing this? I'm checking my security feed. Looks like a prowler in the alley behind Brenda's? Or a bear? From me to everyone. Link, twitch.tv, the recycling raccoon. From me to everyone. Someone check. I'm scared to go outside. Human curiosity is a flaw in our operating system. You tell someone there's a prowler, they get scared. You tell them there's a link to see the prowler, they click. On my Twitch dashboard, the viewer count jumped. 1 viewer, 15 viewers, 56 viewers, 112 viewers. Almost the entire Zoom call migrated to the Twitch tab. I unmuted my microphone on OBS, adding a slight voice modulation to deepen my voice, just in case. Welcome, neighbors, I whispered into my broadcast mic. Let's observe nature in its habitat. On the screen, the neighbors were seeing a split view. On the left, the chimney cam zoomed in on Brenda's bear claw slippers. On the right, the high-altitude drone shot showed the layout of her backyard fortress. Brenda reached the bins. She looked at the gray bin. Trash. She lifted the lid. It was stuffed to the brim. A white kitchen bag was already teetering precariously on top. She looked at the microwave. Now, a microwave is e-waste. It is heavy metal, glass, plastic, and a magnetron. It is absolutely, positively banned from curbside pickup. You have to pay a $25 fee to have it hauled away, or drive it to the dump yourself. Brenda didn't want to pay $25. She looked at the blue bin. Recycling. She opened the lid. It was half empty. The chat on Twitch started to populate. User Susan12. Is that Brenda? User Dave Prez. Why is she wearing bare feet? User Tony the Roof Guy. LMAO. I'm watching from the truck. Get her mark. Brenda lifted the microwave. She groaned. I could see the strain in her shoulders. She hoisted it up and dropped it into the recycling bin. Crunch. It didn't fit. Of course it didn't fit. The opening of a residential recycling bin is about 18 inches wide. The microwave was 20 inches wide. It sat there, wedged in the mouth of the bin like a cork in a bottle. The chat exploded. User Green Thumb. She did not. User Recycle. Rick. That's a microwave. That's not paper. That's not plastic. User Karen Slayer. Screenshotting this. My fines are about to get refunded. Brenda stared at the wedged microwave. She looked around nervously. She looked up at the sky, but missed the drone. She looked at the fence, but missed the chimney cam. She decided to use force. She grabbed the lid of the bin and tried to slam it down on top of the microwave. Bang! 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 It wouldn't close. So Brenda did the unthinkable. She grabbed the handle of the bin to steady herself. She lifted her leg, the one clad in the pink Snoopy pant and the bear claw slipper. And she climbed. She stood on the wheel of the bin. Then she stepped onto the microwave itself. She was now standing inside the mouth of the recycling bin, jumping up and down on a kitchen appliance to force it into the void. User Cop Davis. Technical foul. Excessive use of force on a household appliance. User Mom. Off 3. I literally cannot breathe. I am laughing so hard I woke the baby. User Dave Prez. This is the vice president. This is the woman who fined me for a crooked mailbox. She is surfing a microwave. Crack. We heard it. The shield. Chimney cam picked up the audio. The plastic housing of the microwave gave way under her weight. Or maybe the glass platter inside shattered. Either way, something broke. The microwave slid down into the bin with a sickening scrape. Brenda lost her balance. She flailed. Her left bear claw slipped. She grabbed the fence to steady herself, but her other foot went deep into the bin. She was now knee-deep in her own recycling, stuck in a microwave, wearing a blazer on top and pajamas on bottom. She scrambled out, panting. She dusted off her pants. She grabbed the lid and slammed it shut. It bulged, but it latched. She stood back, hands on her hips, admiring her work. She fixed her hair. She checked her watch. 7:58 p.m. She turned and sprinted, waddled, back toward the house. The Twitch viewer count was at 165. People who weren't even in the HOA were watching. Tony must have shared the link on his contractor Facebook group. I switched back to Zoom. The faces on the grid were different now. People weren't bored anymore. They were covering their mouths. They were wiping tears from their eyes. Mr. Abernathy was laughing so hard he was vibrating. Dave, the president, had his head in his hands, but his shoulders were shaking. 8 p.m. Brenda's camera flickered back on. She was seated. She had composed herself. She took a sip of water from a reusable metal bottle, very eco-friendly. "Welcome back, everyone," Brenda said. Her voice was calm, authoritative. "I hope you're all refreshed. I spent the break reviewing the compliance logs, and I really think this random inspection measure is vital for the soul of our community." Silence. Absolute, heavy silence. "Dave?" Brenda asked. "Are we ready to vote?" Dave unmuted himself. He looked at the camera. He looked tired, but for the first time in years, he looked free. "Brenda," Dave said softly, "before we vote, we had a question from the community chat." "Oh?" Brenda smiled benevolently. "I'm happy to answer. Is it about the plastic numbers on the bottom of bottles? I know those can be confusing." "No," Dave said. "It's about microwaves." Brenda froze. Her smile didn't drop, but her eyes went dead. "Microwaves?" "Yes," Dave continued. "Specifically, does the Green Initiative recommend disposing of a 20-pound GE countertop microwave by stomping it into the blue bin with bear claw slippers?" Brenda blinked. I don't know what you're talking about. That's absurd. Microwaves are e-waste. They must be taken to the county facility. I would never—" I hit the button. I didn't just share the link. I utilized the Zoom share screen feature. I had administrative privileges because I had volunteered to record the meeting minutes 6 months ago. I shared the video file I had just captured. On 148 screens, the footage played. We saw the door open. We saw the Snoopy pants. We saw the bear claws. We saw the microwave. We saw the jump. The stomp. The struggle. It played in glorious 4K resolution. Brenda watched herself. Her face on the webcam went through 5 stages of grief in 10 seconds. Denial. She shook her head. Anger. She turned red. Bargaining. She opened her mouth to speak. Depression. She slumped. Acceptance. She reached for the mouse. That's a deep fake, she shrieked. Her voice cracked. "That is AI. Mark Henderson is a video editor. He generated that. I don't own bear slippers. I unmuted. Brenda, I said, my voice smooth. I'm looking at your window right now. The blinds are open. I can see the slippers under your desk. She looked down. We all saw her look down. And, I added, twisting the knife, I have 2 weeks of footage, Brenda. The toaster, the car battery, the paint cans. I have a whole docu-series. Season 1 is dropping on the neighborhood Facebook group in 5 minutes. The car battery? Dave asked, his voice hardening. Brenda, did you put a lead-acid battery in the recycling? It was a small one, she stammered. That's a federal offense, Officer Davis's voice chimed in. I looked at the grid. Davis had logged in from his patrol car laptop. His username was Officer D. Mrs. Higgins, that's illegal dumping of hazardous materials. I might need to swing by. Brenda stood up. She forgot she was on camera. She forgot about the blazer. She stood up, revealing the pink Snoopy pants to the entire Zoom call, confirming the deep fake was 100% reality. She realized her mistake a second too late. She scrambled to cover the camera with her hand, knocking over her ring light in the process. The screen went black, followed by the text. Brenda Higgins has left the meeting. The Zoom call was silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then pure chaos erupted. People were unmuting. She fined me for a twig, someone yelled. Bear claws. She was wearing bear claws. Motion to dismiss the inspection measure? Dave shouted over the din. Seconded, roared a chorus of 140 voices. Motion to remove Brenda from the board immediately. Seconded. Motion to fine Brenda for everything? All in favor. I sat back in my chair. I closed OBS. I closed Twitch. I took another sip of scotch. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Tony. Tony. I'm crying. I'm literally crying in a Chipotle parking lot. You're a god, Mark. Free roof inspections for life. I looked out the window. Across the street, the lights in Brenda's house went dark, one by one. It was the blackout of a defeated regime. But the night wasn't over. The fallout is where the real fun begins. Because when you strike the queen, the hive doesn't just buzz, it swarms. And I had just kicked the hive apart with a 4K live stream. The silence that follows a nuclear explosion is apparently quite loud after the Zoom call ended, or rather, disintegrated into a cacophony of vindication and laughter. My house fell quiet. But my phone did not. My phone was having a seizure. The neighborhood WhatsApp group, usually reserved for posts about lost cats and suspicious vans, was scrolling so fast it was a blur of neon green bubbles. Neighbor Steve, 204. Did we just witness a murder? Mom Jenna, 108. The slippers. I cannot get over the slippers. Dave Prez, everyone please remain calm. The board will convene an emergency session tomorrow. But yes, I saw it too. Tony Roof Guy, Mark Henderson for president. Beers on me. I sat in my dark office, the glow of the monitors illuminating my face. I felt like a hacker in a spy movie who had just toppled a dictatorship. I exported the video file, the microwave supercut, and saved it to 3 different hard drives and a cloud server. You know, for insurance. Brenda was down, but you never turn your back on a wounded predator, especially one with a law degree and a label maker. I walked to the front window. Across the street, Brenda's house was dark. But then, a flicker of blue light washed over her beige siding. It wasn't a TV. It was a light bar. A police cruiser rolled slowly into the cul-de-sac. It didn't use a siren. It just flashed its lights once, a silent announcement of authority. It was Officer Davis. I grabbed my coat and walked out onto the porch. The air was crisp, smelling of dead leaves and victory. Davis stepped out of the cruiser. He adjusted his belt. He looked at me, standing on my porch with a scotch in hand. He tipped his cap. "Evening, Mr. Henderson," he called out. "Evening, Officer Davis. Quiet night?" "Was," Davis grinned, "until my dispatch got a call about an illegal dumping of hazardous materials incident. Anonymous tip, though the tipper did send a 4K video link as evidence." He walked up Brenda's driveway. He didn't knock on the door. He walked straight to the recycling bin. He opened the lid. He clicked on his flashlight. He whistled. A long, low whistle. "Yep," he said, loud enough for the neighborhood to hear. "That is definitely a GE countertop microwave. And is that a car battery?" He reached in, with gloves, thank God, and shifted the trash. "Yeah, lead acid, leaking slightly. That's a hazmat violation. State Code 402. That's a mandatory citation." Brenda's front door opened. She didn't storm out this time. She didn't have the rake. She didn't have the blazer. She was wearing a bathrobe, clutching it tight around her neck. She looked small, defeated. The helmet of hair was slightly deflated. "Officer?" she squeaked. "Mrs. Higgins," Davis said, his voice professional but cold. "I'm going to need to write you a citation for illegal disposal of hazardous waste. Also, the waste management company has been notified. They're going to flag your address. They don't take kindly to acid in their trucks." "It was a mistake," Brenda whispered. "I was confused. The rules, they change so often." "The rule about not throwing car batteries in with the cardboard has been pretty consistent since the 70s, ma'am," Davis said. He pulled out his ticket book. The scratching of his pen was the only sound in the cul-de-sac. He tore off the slip and handed it to her. "You have a court date in 30 days, or you can pay the fine online. Have a good night." Davis walked back to his car. As he passed my driveway, he didn't look at me, but he gave a subtle thumbs up below the window line. Brenda stood there, holding the ticket. She looked at the bin. She looked at my house. I didn't wave. I didn't gloat. I just took a sip of scotch and went back inside. The morning after, Wednesday morning, is trash day. Usually, the rumble of the waste management truck is an annoyance. Today, it was a symphony. I was up at 6:00 a.m. I set up a tripod in my living room window. I wasn't going to miss this. The truck arrived at 7:15 a.m. It was the big one, the automated side loader with the robotic arm. The driver was a guy named Gus. I knew Gus because Brenda had reported him twice for aggressive braking. Gus pulled up to Brenda's house. He stopped the truck. He didn't use the robotic arm. He opened his door and climbed out. He was wearing heavy work gloves and safety glasses. He walked over to Brenda's blue bin. He flipped the lid open. He stared into the abyss. Then Gus did something legendary. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a roll of stickers, bright neon orange stickers, the ones that say rejected, contaminated. He didn't stick one on the bin. He stuck 5. He plastered the lid. He plastered the front. He plastered the handle. Then he reached into the truck and pulled out a red tag. He zip-tied the lid of the bin shut. He got back in his truck, revved the engine, and drove away without taking a single ounce of her trash. Her bin sat there on the curb, zip-tied and covered in orange shame, like a prisoner of war. The board meeting. The emergency board meeting was held that Friday night. It was in person, at the community clubhouse. Attendance is usually 5 or 6 people. Tonight, it was standing room only. There were people spilling out into the hallway. I saw neighbors I hadn't seen in 3 years. I saw the guy who runs the illegal poker game in his basement. I saw the lady who walks her cat on a leash. Everyone wanted blood. Dave, the president, sat at the head of the table. He looked like a man who had finally filed for divorce from a toxic spouse. Next to him was an empty chair. Brenda's chair. "All right," Dave said, banging a gavel that he had clearly dusted off for the occasion. "Let's call this meeting to order. First item on the agenda, the removal of Vice President Higgins." "Motion!" yelled 7 people simultaneously. "Seconded," said the entire room. "All but in favor?" Every hand went up. Even Mrs. Gable, who was asleep, raised her hand instinctively. "Motion carries," Dave said. He couldn't hide the smile. Brenda Higgins is effectively removed from the board, stripped of her title, and banned from holding office for, let's say, eternity. Cheering. Actual cheering. "Now," Dave said, quieting the room, "we have the matter of the fines. Thanks to the diligent documentation provided by Mr. Henderson." He nodded at me. I was leaning against the back wall, trying to look humble. A few people clapped on my back. "We have calculated the total violations based on the footage. We have categorized them." Dave put a slide up on the projector. The bill: improper disposal of e-waste. Microwave toaster. 2 incidents, X 200 equals $400 hazardous material. Car battery, paint. 2 incidents, X $500 equals $1,000. Contamination of recycling stream. Pizza boxes, styrofoam, vacuum dust. 14 incidents, X 100 equals $1,400. Abuse of HOA power. Attempting to hide trash during inspection hours. $500. Physical damage to bin. Broken wheel, cracked lid. $150. Replacement cost. Cleaning fee. Hazmat cleanup for battery acid. $800. Total fine. $4,250. The room gasped. That wasn't a fine. That was a used Honda Civic. "The management company has already issued the demand letter," Dave said. "It will be deducted from her escrow if not paid. And frankly, we're using the money to throw a block party." The roar of approval nearly blew the roof off the clubhouse. The social rebirth. The change in the neighborhood was instant. It was like the end of a war or the breaking of a fever. On Saturday, I saw Mr. Thompson washing his car. He was using a hose that wasn't coiled perfectly. He waved at me. "Hey, Mark! Nice drone flying!" he shouted. "Thanks, Bill. Nice hose management." He laughed. He actually laughed. People started leaving their bins out until 6 p.m. No one cared. Someone painted their front door a slightly brighter shade of red. No citation was issued. Kids played basketball in the street. The fear was gone. The panopticon had fallen. I was no longer that guy with the noisy drone. I was the liberator. I was the guy who used technology to slay the dragon. Tony came by on Monday. He didn't even have a reason to be there. He just pulled his truck up, blocking my driveway, of course, and hopped out with a box of donuts. "For the hero," Tony said, handing me a chocolate glazed. "You're the one who installed the camera, Tony. You're the accomplice." "I'm just a humble contractor," Tony grinned, chewing on a cigar. "But hey, I drove by Brenda's this morning. You see her yard?" "No, I haven't looked." "Go look." I walked out to the street. Brenda's yard, usually manicured to within an inch of its life, looked different. There was a sign in the grass. A for sale sign. "No way," I breathed. "Way," Tony said. My cousin is a realtor. She called him yesterday, said the neighborhood has gone to the dogs, said she needs to move somewhere with higher standards. She's looking at a gated community in Florida. Florida, I laughed. God help Florida. She'll be their problem soon, Tony said. By the way, I noticed your flashing actually is a little loose on the north side. You want me to fix it? For real this time? Send me a bill, Tony. I'm happy to pay it. The final encounter. I saw her one last time before she moved. It was a Tuesday, of course, trash day. I was outside checking the mail. The for sale sign had a sold sticker on it already. The market is crazy, even for houses possessed by demons. Brenda walked out of her front door. She was dressed in normal clothes, jeans and a sweater. No blazer, no power suit. She saw me. Usually she would look away, or glare, or pull out her phone to record. But this time, she just stopped. She looked at me. She looked at the drone sitting on my porch railing. She walked to the edge of her driveway. "Mark," she said. Her voice wasn't shrill. It was just tired. "Brenda, I hope you're happy," she said. "You ruined the aesthetic of this neighborhood. You turned it into a circus." "I didn't ruin it, Brenda," I said, leaning on my mailbox. "I just leveled the playing field. You can't enforce rules you don't follow yourself. That's not aesthetics. That's tyranny." She scoffed. "I was protecting property values. Someone has to hold the line against chaos. Against microwaves." "The microwave was in the recycling bin, Brenda. You were the chaos." She tightened her jaw. For a second, I saw the old Brenda, the one who would measure grass with a ruler. But then it faded. She knew she had no power here anymore. The badge had been stripped. The gavel had been taken. "Well," she said, turning back to her house. "I'm moving to a place with a strict HOA, a professional HOA. They don't allow drones." "Good luck with that," I called out. "Make sure you read the bylaws, especially Section 9. She stiffened, but she didn't turn back. She walked inside and closed the door. Epilogue. 3 weeks later, the moving truck came. It took all day. I watched from my office window as they loaded the beige sofas, the beige rugs, and the beige soul of Brenda Higgins into the back of a van. When the truck finally pulled away, I felt a strange emotion. It wasn't just relief. It was a little bit of emptiness. A hero needs a villain, right? Batman needs the Joker. Without Brenda, who was I going to torment? But then I saw the new neighbors pulling in. It was a young couple. They had a Subaru with a kayak rack. They had a golden retriever. And most importantly, the guy was carrying a guitar case and a massive smoker grill. I walked out onto my porch. The guy looked up. He waved. "Hey," he shouted. "We're the Martins, just moving in. Hope the smoke from the BBQ won't bother you." I smiled. I looked at the sky. It was clear. Blue. Open. "Smoke it up, buddy," I yelled back. "We don't have rules about that here anymore." I went back inside. I sat down at my desk. I opened the drawer and pulled out the Mavic 3. I wiped a speck of dust off the lens. I didn't need to fly it today. I didn't need to check for microfractures. I didn't need to hunt for violations. But I kept the batteries charged, just in case. Because somewhere out there, in a gated community in Florida, Brenda was unpacking her ruler. She was reading a new set of bylaws. She was preparing to terrorize a new population of retirees. And somewhere, a new Karen was being born. But in Whispering Pines, we were free. I opened my laptop. I logged into the HOA portal. I saw the announcement for the block party. The theme was Green Living. I laughed. I clicked on the folder on my desktop labeled Project Petty. I hovered over the Delete button. I thought about it. Then I dragged the folder to the trash. Are you sure you want to delete Brenda Microwave Stomp 4K Move? I clicked yes. I didn't need the footage anymore. I had the memory. And more importantly, I had the peace and quiet. And if anyone ever tries to tell me my grass is half an inch too high again, well, I know a guy named Tony. And I know the airspace laws. Game over.